We're glad you're here. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Due to recent changes to the Oregon Public Meetings Law, our meetings will now be recorded. Once the video is processed by the city's web team, it will be published on our board's webpage for public viewing. All public attendees are invited to participate in the meeting at the designated opportunities. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question, use the raise hand function on Zoom to indicate so, and we will unmute your microphone for you to share. You can also use the chat feature at any time or submit a question using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, looks like everyone is muted except for me. Good, good. I think we all have our names underneath us, so we don't need to do introductions. I'm the chair, Ellen Russell, and Franziska is standing in as our city liaison, as Lani is not able to be here. So if there's any procedural questions, please send them her way. Please use the chat. I keep an eye on that, or raise your hand, things like that. Any public questions? Anything before we get started? No visitors other than Rob? Okay, then let's go right over to Rob, who has an update on the housing options project.
You want to do approval of the minutes?
Oh, that's later on.
Oh, really?
According to my agenda, that is later on. I think we wanted to get Rob in here and then let him go on his way. With
there it is.
Yep. Okay, great.
Rob, you have until 7:10.
Okay, great. Let me, this is my first Zoom where I'm actually the presenter, so feel free to let me know if something's not working correctly. Let's see. Share my screen.
Perfect.
Great. Okay. Hello, I am Rob Zoeller. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. I'm an associate planner in the planning division, and I'm the project manager for the Housing Options Project. When I last visited with the BCCI in 2018, we were kicking off this project. This is one of several that the city is pursuing as part of our 5-year housing action plan. Today, I'm going to give you an update on what we've been up to since we've last met. So as a reminder, the purpose of this project is to consider where and how additional housing types could be allowed in the city's residential areas. When I say where, I'm referring to potential locations, which is still undetermined at this point. And when I say how, I'm referring to things like design and development standards. Tonight, I'll go over the project background pretty briefly and then cover some updates to the state housing law. I'll review some key takeaways from engagement for the last 2 years before we get into the neighborhood patterns work. And then I'll talk about next steps for the project, and we'll end with a few discussion questions. So what we hope to accomplish is a housing strategy that determines where and how these housing types could be allowed in residential areas. We also would then update the development code and come up with an implementation plan for next steps. You can see in the map to the right that the study area is highlighted in yellow, orange, or brown. These are all residential zones in the city. What's not included in the study area are commercial, mixed use, or employment/industrial zones. For the first round of engagement, we presented the project at about 30 public meetings. We're now working on alternatives, but moving forward slowly since the state is still in the process of rulemaking. We expect that we'll have more clarity on that matter in November. Immediate next steps for us involve completing analysis of the city's residential development patterns, mainly engagement, performing a racial equity analysis that will, among other things, consider what equitable housing solutions might look like in the city. And we're working with a multicultural community engagement team that will conduct outreach for 3 housing-related projects. This fall and winter, we would then get a little deeper into the alternatives. We'll then conduct additional engagement and refine them. And then we'd move into code and map changes sometime next summer or early fall. Now I'd like to take some time to review new state housing law. This is also known as House Bill 2001. I don't know if anyone has spoken to the BCCI about this law. I'll assume people have not heard of it just to give some background, but I can answer more questions about it at the end if you have questions. House Bill 2001 is essentially a new Oregon law that requires middle housing to be allowed in residential areas of all cities and counties. This is statewide. Middle housing refers to duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses, and cottage clusters only. And the reason they did this is that currently there are many residential areas throughout the state that are exclusively single family. This House bill opens up these areas to requires them to allow new housing types. Now, what we know at this point in time is that the law would require that every lot must allow a duplex, and then that every area must allow the other middle types. Now, I know that's vague, and it's still vague because the state has not defined area, and people are still figuring out what that means. But the part about duplexes is fairly certain. And this table just compares the 2 projects because our project originally started 6 months before we were even hearing about House Bill 2001. So it's really kind of coincidence that these timelines fit pretty well. But we are required to come up with alternatives that comply with the state law. So I'm putting them side by side just so you can see where they're similar and different. I've already listed the housing types that are covered by House Bill 2001. The Housing Options Project is also looking at multiplexes and shared court apartments. These are typically buildings with about 5 to 12 units. For ADUs, we're taking more of a big picture look towards all the requirements, but the state law only addresses owner occupancy and off-street parking. To be clear, they say that you can't require a homeowner to live in the main building in order to to build an ADU. Also, it forbids any city from using off-street parking requirements. So 0 parking would be required for ADUs. That's now state law. And also they use different language regarding where it would be allowed in residential zones. At first, we weren't sure if they would mean 2 different things, but now it's looking like both are just looking at residential zones. Moving on to engagement summary. As I mentioned, we had about 30 public meetings, and our strongest takeaways were that people wanted more multi-generational living options. This could be grandparents moving in to help with childcare to a young adult returning home from college. We heard a lot of people ask for more homes for older adults, especially single level homes that would help people age in community. Interestingly, we heard many people say that it wasn't important necessarily for them to stay in their neighborhood, but that they are interested in staying in the city and close to their friends and family. We also heard people ask for more home ownership opportunities, especially for smaller homes that would be a more affordable entry point for people starting out. And we also heard a little bit about design compatibility, which I'll talk about on the next slide. Now, in terms of differences among groups, for multicultural groups, we asked people about potential locations, and we heard more preferences for housing options near schools, parks, and houses of worship. And then for our general outreach with the public and next, we were hearing more options near transit markets and shopping. If anyone has anything to add at the end, I'd love to hear it. So for design preferences, there was generally strong support for ADUs, cottage clusters, and shared court apartments. There was some support for plexes. People were generally more open to homes that matched the scale and form of adjacent single-family homes. This meant greater support for some duplexes and to a lesser extent triplexes, but people were less enthusiastic about quadplexes and especially townhouses. And when I asked why, many people just thought they were incompatible with the scale and form of nearby detached single-family homes. After learning about community priorities, the project shifted gears to alternatives. To begin, we started looking into existing residential development patterns in the city. The idea is that we should understand what is already there before suggesting potential changes to neighborhoods. And with that understanding and feedback from the community about what works well or does not work well, we would then come up with design rules for how new housing types could be allowed in existing neighborhoods. This is a little bit about our research methods in case people were curious. We started by visiting every residential neighborhood to sketch and photograph housing variety and pattern. Back in the office, we used computer programs to analyze lot coverage, building footprints, and floor heights by neighborhood and zone. We then combined this information from the field and with the computer data and discovered that the city could be classified into 3 distinct development periods. Looking at the map on the right, we have the first period in red, and this is mainly homes built before 1964. What this really means is that within this boundary, 3 of every homes would have been built before 1964. And for the second period in orange, we're looking at homes built mainly between 65 and 84. And this one's even higher. In this area, 4 out of 5 homes would have been built in that 20-year time span. The third period is in green. This is between 1985 and 2004. And within this boundary, 3 of 4 houses would have been built in that time period. You'll notice there is no boundary for homes built after 2005. And that's because most of the city was already developed. So homes built after 2005 typically show up in smaller pockets within the other areas. And this is a map that shows how the development areas would overlay on a current NAC map. Considering that NACs were created in the mid-1980s, many of these areas were built out before they received their current neighborhood designation. Some were also built out prior to being annexed by the city, which we can see with West Slope. So it's likely those homes would have developed according to county standards instead of city standards. Now I'm going to take you through some highlights from the 3 periods. These are very high level. I don't know if people have had time to read the report, but we kind of do a deep dive into the report where you can learn a lot more about each period. Now in this period, for homes built before 64, you're more likely to see a mix of detached single-family homes, apartments, and mobile home parks in the same neighborhood. This is where average lot size is the biggest, peaks at about 11,000 square feet. Interestingly, lots with detached single-family homes were typically 25% larger than lots for plexes. Also, for building footprint, detached single-family home triplexes and quadplexes were usually the same size. What's not on the screen is that duplexes were actually smaller than detached single-family homes from that period. At this point in time, most construction is still single-story, and the neighborhoods have rectilinear grids or curvilinear grid street patterns. This usually means it's easier to walk or bike through these neighborhoods, and also there are more corner lots with grids. And sometimes you have different siting opportunities for plexes on corner lots that you might not have in a neighborhood with cul-de-sacs. And here are just a sample of images from the period. There are a lot more in the report. Here we can see that detached single-family homes sometimes look like they're more likely to look like a duplex. But as you move into triplex and quadplex, there starts to be a difference. And especially with parking, which has a pretty big impact on how you perceive the home from a street, a lot of these triplexes and quadplexes have larger parking lots because they're designed to hold anywhere from 4 to 10, in some cases 12 cars. And also I've included apartments and mobile home parks so we can see the range of options. You don't see townhouses in this period because we don't have them showing up until 1968. So this is the second development period, and this is where the greatest percentage of plexes were actually built. Between 1965 and 1974 is when most of the existing duplexes were built. Up until 1960, when the development code was first started in 1946, it allowed all housing types in all neighborhoods. But in 1960, it started to change, and the first exclusively single-family neighborhood was created. But it was just one, I believe. And then from 1960 to 1978, there wasn't too much change. But in 1978 is when there was a big change. And that's when the city changed the development code to reserve most of the residential land for detached single-family homes only. And plexes were built in very few areas. So from 1980 onward, we're seeing mostly single-family homes. Within this period, buildings also, their building footprint peaks. That means they're a little bit wider, they're a little bit longer. This is to be expected considering ranches were pretty common and homes were still single story. As they start to become multi-story, the footprint will get smaller. And we also see a shift in this period from more of the smaller walkable blocks to first curvilinear grids and then curvilinear streetwork with cul-de-sacs. Here are a few existing images also from this period. We can see the split level ranch starts to become more popular. And for duplexes, I think we see about 2 paths. There's the one in the middle top, which uses more green space up front. And then there's also a pattern where parking, either driveways or garages, might dominate the street presence. We see a similar divergence with quadplexes. On the bottom left, you're looking at a quadplex that resembles more of a single family home, but then right next to it, you see something that, is really, I've only seen as a quadplex, but they put all of their parking up front. So you have a 4-car garage, and then it's paved parking from property line to property line. And I've also included townhouses here because we started to see them more in 68 on, and those became increasingly popular. The third period is 1985 to 2004. As I mentioned before, with the development code update in 1978, it basically created a pathway where we're going to see more single family homes in this period. Average lot size also for this period decreases. So it went down from about 8,300 square feet. You might remember that the first period peaked at close to 11,000 square feet, I believe. And with lot sizes getting smaller and buildings mostly staying the same footprint, it decreased a little bit, but I mean, that impact was marginal. So basically houses are becoming taller and houses are appearing closer together in these neighborhoods. And we're starting to see almost exclusively curvilinear street with cul-de-sac development. So in this top row here, I put a sample of detached single family homes. We see more 2- and 3-car garages. Homes are getting a little bit bigger. But I also wanted to acknowledge that there was a trend for some developments to make smaller homes. It was more of a niche market, but in the top right, we can see some properties where it was smaller. Now in this period, we also have the ADU. I'm sure we've talked to you about ADUs in the past, but just as a reminder, an accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, is a small self-contained home on the same lot as a principal home. And it can be attached or detached from the principal home. I'm actually giving you this presentation from an ADU myself. This is my ADU. I'm happy to answer any questions if people have them. And in 1999 is when Beaverton updated the development code to allow ADUs. At present, they're limited to 800 square feet, and only one ADU is allowed on each property. There were very few plexes built in this period, which is why they're not even shown on the screen. Mostly, and if it's not a single family home, mostly apartments and townhouses. And something I've heard, a question I've had from other people in the past is, where are condos? And in case anyone's thinking that, I'll say that condos aren't included in the presentation because they're more of an ownership type and they cross all the types. So a condo could be a detached single family home, a townhouse, a duplex. It covers everything. Now, I just want to take you through a few pictures of current trends, and I'd love to get your thoughts on some of these. These homes are not in Beaverton, and some might be in the Pacific Northwest, and some are outside of the area. The idea is just to think about what you might like about them, what you might not like about these ideas. If you have additional thoughts about the actual patterns themselves, we do have a survey, which I'll share at the end, but that's more of an opportunity to do a deep dive and share your insights. So as you look at these, I would generally ask yourself, which ones do you like and why, or why not? And start to think about how do you feel about the entrances? Some might have one visible entrance, some have two. In some cases, not here, but you might not even see an entrance from the street. Some duplexes might be close to the street, others are pretty far back. Some might have one driveway, some might have two, and others might not have a driveway at all. And everything on this page is a triplex. For the sake of discussion, let's consider a triplex as 3 units on one lot. And what I mean by that is that 5 of the pictures on this page consists of one building. But if you look at the lower left image, it actually consists of 2 buildings. The building up front is a detached single family home that was existing. And then the property owner built a duplex in back. So technically there are 3 dwelling units on this property, even though they're separate detached structures. Again, I would ask you to think about, notice which ones are closer to the street or not. How do you feel about requiring a shared driveway? Or, some might have multiple driveways. What does that do to the street presence? Or maybe it's actually desirable. And last, we're looking at quadplexes. As before with triplexes, let's consider a quadplex as 4 units on one lot, because there are some cities that are starting to allow two duplexes on one lot to count as a quadplex. With quadplexes, the parking pattern varies quite a bit. A lot of these lots were already developed and they're being redeveloped. So for some cities, it's hard to get parking to fit on them. I've seen some scenarios where they just have 0.5 parking spaces per unit. That would mean a quadplex would have 2 parking spaces total. And then I've seen others where they require 1 space per unit. For next steps for the project, I mentioned earlier that we were going to perform a racial equity analysis and create a housing leadership cohort. I'll also be meeting with our HOP work group, hopefully in August or September. We would be interviewing developers and lending institutions to get their feedback about what they think are barriers in here and what they might be more likely to lend to or not lend to. We'll also be looking to perform an economic analysis to evaluate capacity and affordability issues. We'll likely wait until state rulemaking concludes before we move forward with that work. And all of this will inform our work with developing the alternatives. Now, this is pretty dense, but I just wanted to, that's why I want to share this in advance. But before I ask the questions, I just wanted to have a place for us to look at some of the high level takeaways from as the patterns moved from homes before 64 to the more current ones. We can see that the oldest neighborhoods included a mix of housing types, and many homes were single-story buildings on larger lots, but over time, these became smaller, lots became smaller, buildings became taller. Also, we saw a move from older homes in more diverse neighborhoods, diverse in terms of housing types, moving towards exclusively single-family neighborhoods. And for most housing types, we can see that houses became bigger and taller. Again, lot size got smaller. Driveways became wider. Garages increased from 1 car to 2 cars or 3-car garages. Garages also moved closer to the street and entrances moved further back. And the size, type, and quality of yards and trees decreased as homes got bigger and lots got smaller. So I know that's a lot of information. Hopefully people had time to review the packet beforehand. I'd like to start with just asking how you generally feel about the current trends for duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. We can just say plexes going forward to keep it shorter. And if you want me to go back to any slide and to discuss something, just let me know.
And I just want to jump in here really quick to the attendees that are with us who joined after we gave the announcement about how to participate in the meeting. If you do have a question that you want to ask verbally versus typing in the Q&A or in the chat function, just use the raise hand feature, and I or Ellen can unmute you so you can ask Rob whatever question you might have or make any comment that you might have. So we have, Rob, we have one question here. Are above ground utilities an obstacle to having more density and ADUs? They do not seem to be addressed here.
Well, the very high level answer is that we've heard no. But as we move forward, the utilities become a much bigger part of the conversation as we move forward. So when we come up with 3 potential strategies, let's say, and then I go to talk to the public about which ones they like, we're going to be working with Public Works and the developers, and they're going to be looking at these at the same time. And that's when we would kind of get into the specifics for if it were a problem. Now, something I didn't discuss about this because it's more about the state housing law, but I can tell you that the state housing law does address utilities and whether some neighborhoods might not be able to serve these housing types. And it refers to all housing types, not specifically ADUs. And what it says is that if a city feels they don't have the capacity to support new housing types, they can submit a request for a time exemption to comply, but that request needs to be coupled with a plan of how they're going to provide those utilities. So the state law has essentially said, you can't say we don't have the utility support, but we'll give you more time to come up with solutions so that you can fix it.
Great, thanks, Rob. Are there, oh, continue.
I was just gonna say, the state housing law is a pretty big change. And so I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these questions, but if people aren't certain about what's changed, because it's pretty monumental, you know, I can answer your questions about the state housing law too, to the best of my ability.
Rob, are you able to just, you know, in very simplistic terms, talk about why the new housing law change is so monumental?
Sure. Yes. I mean, it's pretty, I mean, groundbreaking sounds dramatic, but I mean, I would say it essentially is. It's the first law in the nation to essentially, you know, there's no other way to say it, but I mean, it's saying you can't have single family home neighborhoods anymore. I mean, every single neighborhood needs to find a way to allow these new housing types. The vast majority of our city's residential land is designated for exclusively detached single family. And when I say detached single family, you know, I mean a standalone house and not a townhouse, because a townhouse is attached single family. I haven't looked at the numbers in a while, but it's more than 50% of our land is reserved for only detached single family homes. State lawmakers thought that that was prohibitively expensive because the land is expensive and it's hard for people to move into these neighborhoods, especially if they're just starting out. And by changing this law, they're requiring all cities and counties to allow housing types that might be more affordable in the long term in these neighborhoods. Now, new construction is almost always expensive. It's not like someone's going to build a duplex and it's just going to be cheap, but it will provide more affordable entry points for families starting out. And no one, I think I said this, but it hasn't happened anywhere else in the country. There's nowhere else to compare. Oregon's the first. Minneapolis as a city, they made that change just before us, but it's not statewide. We're the first statewide to do this.
I have a question.
Yes.
Oh, wait. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead, Cate, and then we'll take a question from.
Oh, okay. My question was, so does this mean, what does this mean if you're in a neighborhood that's zoned R7 and it's only single detached houses? Does this mean that your neighbors can come in and even though it's an R7 zoning, put another unit or two on their property and turn it into a triplex? Or how does that work out?
Well, there's one thing we know for certain, and then there's a few things they're still figuring out. What we know for certain is that your neighbor could build a duplex. What we don't know for certain is if that could be a triplex, because the state rulemaking committee has not decided. They haven't come up with guidance yet for what that means. The bill's 7 pages and everyone's kind of scrambling to figure out what do we do with this new law. But duplexes could be built on any lot.
So the lot size for residential, does that not have any meaning anymore? Or is there still limits then? You're saying you can't put more than we're still trying to figure out whether you can do more than a duplex.
That's what they're figuring out right now.
Okay.
So Brian Martin, the long range planning manager, is on the state rulemaking committee. So we have the opportunity to kind of have a front row seat to these discussions and see how they're working out in real time. And what they're trying to figure out now is what do we do about lot size and what do we do about density? Because this essentially kind of makes it seem almost like, what is density if you're just saying these are allowed everywhere? What they're trying to do is, you know, what we would love to see is the opportunity for cities to look more closely at areas and figure out where the best areas are. I know that's what Brian's advocating for, but we won't really know until November what the guidance would be for where these would be allowed. I do know there's discussions looking at whether cities would have to require the same lot size for all housing types. So in R7, the minimum lot size is 7,000 square feet. There are conversations about the fact that that would be the lot size for all housing types. So a quadplex could be built on a 7,000 square foot lot. And then there's another conversation saying, well, what if we scale it and say, okay, you can build the quadplex in R7, but it needs to be 125 or 150%. So we should know more in November, I'm hoping, because that's when the state rulemaking is supposed to conclude. And then we have until 2022 to either come up with our own changes or accept the state model code. Now, I'm assuming most cities want to come up with their own changes, don't want to accept a state model code. So our goal would be to try to figure out how we're going to do this before June 2022, when the state model code would kick in. And I would be happy to come back in November, when I think it would be very helpful when we have a clearer path of what this looks like. And then I could, if you have time on your agenda, just give you, an update on the new state law and what that means for neighborhoods.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to a question, typed question from Rick. Rob, are you also getting day use counts from THRPD about park usage in the 3 areas? Increased density may result in increased usage of parks.
Are we getting park density data? I have not, but that's a good, I'd be interested in seeing that. We do communicate with THBRD. We have a technical advisory committee where we ask these questions, and that's something that I could bring up at our next meeting. It's not scheduled yet, but in the late summer, early fall, probably fall, we'll have that meeting.
Okay, our next question is from Deborah Stewart. The biggest concern I have heard is the fear that my neighbor will sell their single family home and a new owner will come in and build a quadplex on a single family lot. Also concerned about traffic, parking, and proximity of transit.
I understand that for sure. And I think unfortunately, because we don't know where they would be allowed at this point, I can't say for certain whether they could. It could go in either direction. If the state gives us more some latitude to decide where they go, then we could take things like transit into account. But there's a possibility that they will take a different approach, and then it would just be up to what a property owner wants to do. The city, in that case, wouldn't be able to intervene. But it's a possibility, if I'm being honest.
Okay, our next question is from Adam. Are height restrictions up for discussion in this process?
So what's interesting about, and I mean, yes, in a way, what's interesting about these design requirements is that, and this is a conversation we need to have also with our lawyers, because this is more of a legal issue, but what the housing law is trying to do is say that generally these housing types can't have more barriers than detached single family homes. And so you couldn't come up with a height limitation that applied to, say, a triplex, but not the detached single family home. What I'm assuming they'll say is that if you wanted to look at everything, then you could have that conversation, but you can't target one housing type.
Okay, our next question is from Deborah again. Are we also making the assumption that any of this increased density will be affordable or low-income housing?
Well, when you say affordable for low-income housing, are you assuming that it would be built without subsidies, or would there be subsidies? Because we're not looking, I mean, we could be looking at incentives in the future, but it's not necessarily about affordable housing. They've got to be careful when they use that phrase. What we would like to see is that housing would become more affordable over time. But the bottom line is that these new housing types will probably be expensive, to a lot of people, and it would take time to filter down, as they say. When I've talked to some developers about new construction, some of these homes are still it's been a while since I've looked at numbers, but I mean, it's hard to find a home less than 300,000. When I was talking to our, we hired an economic analysis firm, and the work is on pause until the rulemaking concludes. But they were saying that in order to get a home that would cost, let's say, $300,000 or less, you're usually looking at an apartment building that's 6 units or more. So a sixplex would be able to then sell condos for 300,000. A duplex or triplex might be selling for more. So to say that it's affordable, it's affordable to some people. But if we're looking at what we think of as affordable housing, making, let's say, between 60 and 80% of the median income, I mean, without public subsidy, it wouldn't be affordable.
Okay, and unfortunately, this is the last question. I see a few other comments from Terry and Deborah. We're going to have to push those over to email or maybe have a further update. The last question comes from Frosty. Will the state or city be able to tell a single family homeowner that they must build another housing structure on their current property if the lot is larger than what they may allow?
Well, again, I feel like a broken record. I feel like we'll know for certain in November. My general my inclination now is to say no, but it would just be up to the property owner what they want to build. I mean, you can still build a detached single family home, but the state has not figured out, we don't know as much about density, but I haven't heard anything about preventing people from building single family homes.
This was a point that could the city or state mandate it?
Well, they would need a new law. I don't think it's covered by this law.
So
That's not the intent of this law.
Okay, and just one further thing from Sharon. This presentation has changed significantly from the time of our open house presentations. What would you like from BCCI moving forward? And are you making presentations to the virtual NAC meetings? And then we'll move on.
Well, we have to come up with a new public engagement summary, and that would come down to what our schedule is for having to comply with state law. We're certainly open to more updates. Whether or not we could do the full tour, I don't know if we could commit to that, but we could have discussions about certain neighborhoods or coming back to BCCI or combining some neighborhoods into one. And you're right, this neighborhood has changed a lot. A lot of it having to do with the changes in state law, because it's the open house was several months before that, and things have changed quite a bit. I know this is a lot to take in, so I expect people have a lot of questions. If you want to just keep forwarding it to me, we can come up with a frequently asked questions section on our website. I can pop in without a presentation if you want me to just kind of answer questions at another meeting. I'm happy to do that. And I'd love to come back and talk more about what's really in the bill after November when everything is finalized.
And I just want to jump in here really quick and say that I put Rob's email address in the chat so that anybody can email him directly. And I'll also make sure that Rob gets a copy of the questions that were asked tonight in the chat and the one question that was, or the comment that was submitted via the Q&A function. So Rob, I'll get that all to you after the meeting so that if there's any follow-up that needs to be done, you can take care of that.
Sure. And I'll would like to ask people, if you haven't taken the survey already, please consider taking it if you have the time.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. We're going to talk about the open city council seat, new position number 6. And this information went out in the Friday update, so I'm not going to read the whole thing word for word, but there is going to be a new council position. The filing is open right now. You have to be 18 years old. By the election date, you have to be a qualified elector of the state. You have to be able to vote. You have to reside continuously in the city during the 6 months immediately preceding the election and be willing to sign an acceptance of nomination form. The filing deadline is August 25th. And This is a very big deal. We have a new council seat because of what happened in the last election. So I imagine this is going to be spoken about at the NAC meetings. Has anyone had any questions or interest or anything to say about this topic for the next 5 or so minutes?
It'll be a big part of the voters forum.
Yes, yes. Has anyone heard anyone express interest in filing? No? Okay.
I know that there is a woman, her name is Nadia, and I'm forgetting her last name, who is going to run, and
Cate, you got muted.
So I was saying that there's, I've forgotten her last name. Her name is Nadia, who is going to run, and I am seriously considering running myself too. I'm just trying to make up my mind for sure. I stepped out of my seat initially to work on the charter update because I didn't want to have to spend my time working on running to win an election. I thought it would be better to spend my time working to have this charter update go because I thought that was the greatest thing that I could do for the long-term health of the city. So I chose to work on that, and then things got really odd. I ended up running for mayor at the last minute because I wasn't running for my seat, and as a way again to further the message about the charter change. And now I'm thinking that it would be an honor, and it might be my little name in the legacy of Beaverton to be the first person to hold position number 6 after spending the last 13 years talking about creating this new form of government. Again, I'm not for sure I'm leaning that way. I haven't heard of any other people so far, but it's open, and whoever gets the most votes gets the seat in November. That's how it works.
So really quick, the individual that you're referring to, Councilor Cate, is Nadia Hassan.
And thank you, Sharon, for mentioning that there is a city manager survey out there right now. Maybe we can get a link to that to put in the chat.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. I can also expand upon that as well, as I was the one that sent the email out to everybody asking them to please complete it. So the situation with that survey is actually for the interim city manager recruitment. So as most or many of you all know, the city charter will be operational January 1st. But in the intervening period, they're recruiting for an interim city manager who they expect to hold the position for about 6 months while they are able to complete a full recruitment. They have elected to put the full recruitment on hold since there's going to be significant changes to, adding a new council member. We have the mayoral race also happening in November. So they don't, since city council is in charge of that hiring decision, they don't want to move forward with the full hiring of whoever is meant to be in that role going forward until they have everybody on city council who is meant to be on city council. So in the meantime, they are recruiting, like I said, for that interim city manager. And so they have started drafting the class specifications for that position. And they are requesting feedback from folks on boards and commissions and on NACs who are really intimately familiar with the city and the needs of the community, just to let us know if there's anything missing. And so I'll go ahead and put a link to that in the chat just for anybody who hasn't completed that already. You should have got it in your email from me. There's also a blurb about it in the latest NAC Friday update. But if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions that I'm able to answer. I don't have all of the answers. I'm more the messenger in this case on behalf of Human Resources Department.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Terry.
or maybe it's just a comment. I think, well, I'll speak for myself, that I'm not really certain how the new iteration of the council, how their functionality with the city changes from the previous format to the new format. And I think some city generated information regarding this transition of the responsibilities of council members would be of use for general interest. I'm not quite sure the right format for that, but I mean, maybe a FAQ when you have the information available for the new council seat, kind of talking about the new responsibilities based on the new charter for city council members.
So I can speak a little bit about that. So currently how things are getting divvied up between responsibilities between council and mayor and the new city manager are currently in discussions for how that will all work. Another thing that I'm involved with is also doing, coming, at the end of August, going into the fall, is going to be more of a community education campaign, because there may be many folks in Beaverton who don't necessarily understand what the role of a city manager is specifically. And because Beaverton, due to this new charter, it is a little bit different than how it is in other cities in terms of how the city manager and the council and the mayor all function together under this new charter. So we will be doing a lot of informational outreach to help folks understand how these new roles function. And then so that folks can be really prepared when we start to do the public engagement efforts around the major recruitment for the full city manager. But that will also involve kind of distinguishing, what will the new council members do, what will the new mayor do, and what will the new city manager do. And I just want to make a point, Teresa in the audience was really great in reminding me that city council will discuss more about the city manager tomorrow at the work session 20207, classification, specification, and compensation for city manager. And that's going to be, that presentation is going to be given by the Human Resources Director, Patricia. If anybody wants to tune into that for city council. Councilor Cate, did you want to add anything to anything that I just said?
Yeah, I can add just a little bit. The biggest change will be, of course, to what the mayor does. And what it will do is it'll give us a little more ability to have insight as to some of the operations of the city. The city manager would be chosen by the city council at large, as a whole. That includes the mayor. So what it really does is it creates more of an interconnect between what's happening in the city and the councilors. And we get to see a little bit more into our role. Our role is really to set policy, right? The plans for the city. We should never be in the middle of who should get a contract or who should be hired or fired. Those type of operational decisions are really, for good reasons, not part of the purview of the council. We are one of now going to be 7 votes to set the policies, the plans for the city. So I think the council will look fairly similar to what we do now, although again, we'll have just more interaction from the city manager that is the kind of the go-between to share with us what we need to do from an executive standpoint. And that could be things where we make decisions about new positions, budgeting. A lot of that type of information we'll get more direct information through the city manager than we currently do from the form of government we have now. That's the biggest changes I see. And again, the mayor will be more of he'll have some roles interconnecting, but it becomes more of a, he's the mayor, he or she is no longer the operations manager. They're not involved in all those decisions anymore.
I guess my thought was it's a use. I mean, I think we're focusing in on the city manager, and that's a key personnel person, so I'm not disputing that, but I think the different roles of the mayor and the council, I think also need to be part of this conversation. That's my thought.
so we see the whole picture. Yep, I agree.
Okay, let's take a quick question from Frosty. And
Yeah, I know I've been told Pat Wolcott is looking to run for that new city council position. He was our NAC chair for a number of years and was on BCCI for a while.
Thank you. I do remember Pat. All right, Cate, we have your counselor update.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to talk about a little bit. One was that tomorrow we'll have that discussion about the city manager. And we also have another item that's a pretty big deal right now. We've been having a lot of people coming to talk about police reform. And we're looking at how to do that effectively in our community. We're setting up, the Human Rights Advisory Commission is going to, in their next monthly sessions, be looking at a variety of topics. We're looking to hold some kind of open houses where we get input and feedback from the community. I'm hoping we would set up a committee, a task force that would be involved, again, representing different folks from different parts of the community to have discussions about what we will ultimately pass or change within our own city policies. So that tends to continue to be a big discussion, and there's a lot of focus right now on, any police reform we might do within the city. I wish we were talking more about COVID and safety. We're doing a fair amount of work on but I hope that we continue. The one thing I see that I wish we could get our arms around is that people have different bits of information about what does this look like? What should I really be doing? When you wear a mask, how do you really wear a mask? How do you clean it? What are some of the specifics about how to do things safely? It just seems like information is so scattered around that it would be valuable to have some way to have it come directly to our community. I'm still working on that right now, trying to think of some thoughts to help basically our neighborhoods understand choices and how to be safe, and who might want to consider what kind of practices as this COVID thing continues and we continue to learn more about how it really works. There's still so many unknowns about exactly how you get infected and why some people have really a lot worse results while other people have almost no symptoms or no symptoms, and yet we have people who are even healthy who get very, very ill in a variety of ways. There's still a lot more for us to understand about COVID, and my hope is that we can get our best information out about how to still continue to, our economy. We need to continue to have our economy moving, but how do we do that in a way that protects people that need to be protected? So we'll see what continues to come from that. Today, we just got a grant. Kudos to our staff and to, we have a person who advocates for us at the state level. We got $465,000 awarded from the state for us to do some more work. So yay, we can at least continue to, help our community as best as we can. We keep putting together pots of money to do what we can within the city to help as well. And those are the big things that I see going on. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
I have a suggestion for Cate. I've been working with Dr. Mark Lovelace, who is an infectious disease specialist. He ran the HIV/AIDS program at OHSU, was a state epidemiologist for AIDS, and he's consulting for Multnomah County now and the state on COVID. He's a very personal friend, and he would be able to fill and answer every single question or concern that you had. He is also, I've hired him to be our company's medical advisor, because we do a lot of security systems for businesses and financial institutions, and he is a wealth of information, and I'd be more than happy to put you in contact with him to at least discuss the possibility of Beaverton using him. He's consulting right now for Multnomah County, and he's been at the state level too. Okay. And I worked with him as a clinician as well before. He's an amazing guy.
Wow, he sounds.
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'd love to talk with him. That would
Yeah.
be interesting.
If
Thanks.
you want me to say, I think I've got your email, Cate. I can email you his contact information, but we've been even doing webinars for hundreds of our customers on how to open business and be safe and answer those questions that you've already asked.
Yeah, I'd love that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Frosty. That will be helpful.
I think we had this suggestion last month is BCCI should extend an invitation to the new chief of police to appear here.
Yeah.
That on the schedule for next month.
I mean, if you'd like Dr. Lovelace to do a BCCI presentation for a few minutes, he can, he's got some amazing slides that can explain so much so quickly in 10 to 15, probably 15 minutes.
Franziska, let's see what we can fit on the schedule next month. And Sharon had a question for Cate. Is the police reform discussion also including SROs, that's school resource officers?
Yeah, right now we live in such a kind of a fractured world right now. There's just so much going on in different directions. We are going to have a conversation. It's just a conversation tomorrow night about SROs. Carl Mead is coming from the school district to have that conversation with the council. I don't think we'll be I don't think we're going to be making decisions. Again, I think some of that needs to be, to me, a wider discussion about what's really happening on the ground so that we really come up with things that will make for a better future rather than, I wouldn't feel comfortable as a counselor right now just sitting up there and making decisions at this point. So there, like I said, tomorrow night there will be a discussion about it, but it'll be a work session. I don't think we'll be coming up with any suggested changes at this point, but you never know. I'm only one counselor. We'll see what everyone else has to say.
There was an email that went out from the Beaverton School District. It was a survey about SROs.
Interesting.
I didn't participate because I think it's more high school, more directed at high school, not elementary.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for Cate?
Adam, did you have your hand up?
I did. About the police chief. She came to Highland NAC this month, and there's a video of it, the Zoom meeting. We took extended questions from her. And I just want to introduce myself. I'm Adam. I'm the chair of the Highland NAC. Our BCCI rep left our NAC, and I'm just filling in until we find someone permanent.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll work with Franziska and make sure that gets out in an email and a follow-up email. Thank you.
Should we make Adam permanent?
Oh, yes. And also welcome, Adam. Happy to have you. Happy to keep you. Erik, do you have a question?
I do. So, Cate, right around, I think it was the start of this year into last year, the council passed the, the environmental plan. I know they were looking into, the city was looking into hiring a sustainability manager, and then of course COVID happened. So what's the status with all of that?
That is an excellent question, Erik. I can find out. You're right. We've had a hard time. That sustainability position, I think we actually filled it twice, but for reasons people didn't take them. So and then you're right, then COVID hit, and I haven't heard anything since then, but that's a good question. I will find out where we are with that and get an email back out to you guys.
Well, since it's a position within the mayor's department, I can tell you that they actually just hired the sustainability analyst, which is very exciting. They just sent out an announcement regarding, the person that they hired. He sounds super talented with an extensive background. So I can't recall if that email was citywide or city staff or mayor's office, but that is official. So we do have somebody in the role to start implementing the climate action plan.
Yay! Well, 3 is a charm, right? Hopefully this is a go.
Bravo. Okay.
Yay.
Thank you.
Anything else? We can move on to the consent agenda for the July minutes. Were there any other edits? Any other adjustments? Is
I
there a
don't know what
motion?
you mean by other, but I sent in some, which included if there is an Erik and an Erik, and one Erik is motioning and one Erik is seconding, to mention who's who.
We do have two Erics. Thank
But
you.
that
C or
was just
K,
a
C or K.
Yeah, right. So I had sent in my changes already, so, and I don't have them committed to memory.
I move to approve them based on Sharon's edits.
Thank
Second,
you. There's a motion to approve the minutes as amended. from
second.
Frosty. So somebody
Erik
said
with a C.
Erik with a C.
Erik with a C seconded. All those in favor?
Just call me Bob.
All right. All those abstaining or declining?
Erik.
What?
No, I approve. I approve.
Just call you Ray.
Okay, the minutes have been approved. Thank you all. Now we're going to break up into our subcommittee meetings.
Actually, I think it's just updates tonight.
Oh, just updates. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
see,
how do we break up into subcommittees?
no, sorry.
Well,
we have
that's
to-
actually a pretty fancy feature on Zoom, which we will try out next month.
Okay,
Called
good.
breakout rooms, and we can all split up into 3 separate breakout rooms for our subcommittee meetings.
Something
I have
new.
done it on other things. It is actually really cool, and we'll show you all next month.
Old dog, new tricks.
I don't see Travis here. He's the only one that can do updates for the matching grants.
Oh.
As far as I know.
I can give you an but see who else is on there.
It would be myself and
Yeah, you and me and Erik and Birgit
Birgit.
and
Sharon.
yeah, and she's not here, and neither's Erik. Shoot, I should have had that with me. I know that there is one grant that we had a meeting for, and thanks to Franziska and Miles. It's a potential partnership between Greenway and South Beaverton. And where's Jim? Jim, your vice president, is it Jennifer? You're muted, Jim. Your vice president of your NAC and Birgit have been trying to put together a proposal to have a virtual dog walk run. And we're looking at sometime in September. Time is running a little bit late. We were supposed to have we had scheduled a conference call or a Zoom meeting a week ago today, and Birgit wasn't able to make it, but Jennifer put together some things like that. I don't know why it shows backwards when I show it to the camera, but we're working on that, and hopefully by next month, maybe we'll have something to present to the subcommittee in our new chat room, sub-chat room.
Thank you. Sharon, do you want to take the events subcommittee?
Okay, I'm pinch hitting for Joe. So October 14th is the Voters Forum. That's going to be huge. So really putting a call out to everybody, please share this with your NACs, share it with your, your friends, your neighbors. And especially since we have landed on this date, we want to try and avoid any kind of conflicts in this date. Erik with a C is going to be our moderator. That is awesome.
And one point about the Voters Forum, Sharon, is that Joe went out and hustled a bunch of co-sponsors.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that.
Okay, thank you.
So, and actually that was my next point. So he had been looking into and actually reaching out to a variety of people, including the League of Women Voters, the Public Affairs Forum, the Beaverton Downtown Association, and the Chamber of Commerce. So in talking with Lani beforehand about this, we're not going to go deep down into the weeds about who's doing what and who said yes, who said no, but just to be aware that these folks have been reached out to. How do we coordinate this with the NACs and boards and commissions? So basically it is for those who are going back to their NACs, what do you need from us? What can we do to help you report out the crucial pieces of information about the Voters Forum, and to make sure that you put it on your agendas? As far as the boards and commissions, I believe, now, I don't know, Franziska, do you have something that has the boards and commissions staff liaisons and the boards and commissions meetings?
Yes. I thought did Lani not send that to you directly?
Yeah, but I thought she was going to have you share it.
Oh, yes. I can definitely screen share that. Give me
Okay.
just a second.
So basically, while she's getting that up, I want everybody to think about going to another board or commission that is obviously not BCCI. I personally am going to seed this conversation by saying, because I'm on the Beaverton Arts Commission, that I will report out to them. And if we can have others who will want to take either the Committee on Aging, the Budget Committee, the Advisory, Bicycle Advisory, Diversity, Human Rights, Library, MYAB, Terry, you're going to take Planning Commission, right? Social Services, Traffic, Urban Renewal, and Visioning. So if people can look at this, and I'm going to just say, you don't need to really commit right now, this moment, but if this can go out to people, maybe Franziska, if that can go out to people that they can look at it at their convenience as an action item, maybe people then can say, I will take this particular one and report out to a committee or a commission or a board other than ourselves. Does that make sense?
I think Lani sent that out to the entire board along with the agenda and the minutes.
It was in our packet.
Okay,
perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, everybody should have that information for the staff liaisons and the boards and commissions, dates and times. I do want to just make a quick note though, that because of COVID and virtual meetings, not everybody, just because you see a date on the calendar, some boards, if they don't have anything pressing, are canceling meetings. So the most accurate way that you can see what meetings are going to be happening in the next month is to actually use the city calendar. That should just be used as a reference, a generic reference point for when, is it the first Wednesday of the month? Is it the third Thursday of the month? But in terms of whether a meeting is actually happening, the city calendar has the most accurate information.
Okay, awesome, awesome. Plus you have the liaisons information as well. Let's see, what else? So here's the big one. My crystal ball is fuzzy at best. So what format are we going to have? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be virtual? Or is it going to be a hybrid? Which is the same conversation that the schools are having. So, October, we're not going to be in phase 2. So we don't know how that's going to all play out. But as far as location, if we do have a location right now, the library auditorium is the only thing that we have because the schools are not available to us. So where we were doing Beaverton High School before, that's no longer an option. So anybody who has ideas for venues, please get that to Lani. If it's THPRD, I mentioned to her LC Stir because they're going to be the very last to come online for opening up in THPRD.
And I have sent an inquiry to LC Stir, so I am discussing with them the prospect of having that as a possible location. But in the meantime, the library auditorium is for sure reserved.
Right, with I guess a cap of 50 people, is that correct? All right. And then we're gonna not do the reception like we've done in the past. So the time frame is gonna be a 7 to 9 o'clock time frame for the forum. And then that we do know that the featured races are gonna be the mayor, the open city council seat, and most likely the runoff on the Washington County Commissioner seat. So the homework is, what do we want to include into the community to get the word out and get feedback from, and what is our effective outreach during this time, because things are just really different. We do have a citywide postcard that's going to go out, and I believe, and Franziska, tell me, I think the printer needs to have it by the 1st or 2nd weekend of September.
Actually, I just got that information back from Reprographics today. I will tell you exactly what that timeline is. So it needs to get to the printer by September 16th, Wednesday, September 16th.
Okay.
And it will get sent out to USPS Friday, September 25th.
Oh, okay, awesome. So, and then last but not least, and this is the thing that always kind of is the thing we're rattling cages and shaking our trees about, is please come up with questions, candidate questions for these races. This is something to start considering now all the way up until the push in September, October. Back to how this might play out. Option A is if we're in person, the candidates are going to come into a venue. Erik is going to be the moderator. Terry and I are going to be the timekeepers, right? And that 50 tickets will be, it'll be limited to 50 tickets. B is the virtual, which is filming them, no audience. And then C is everyone is remote. So any questions about Voters Forum, which is our huge, huge commitment this year in a very, very different time?
As you go to the different boards and commissions, you might want to mention to each of those commissions and boards that they have an opportunity to provide questions as well as participate in the Voters Forum. So please urge them to contribute to the questioning. And secondarily, I think it's incumbent on the events subcommittee to decide those races besides the city and the county race that need to be addressed. We've done state legislative races in the past. We've also had statewide races in the past. Mm-hmm. And I think in the past we've done some ballot measures. We have to wait and see what those ballot measures are going to be before we decide to do that. But that's a group decision as well. What kind of swings your tree here? What makes you want a question you want to ask? So, and a contest that you want to have on the Voters Forum.
Very good. Also, I wanted to mention one other thing. Those who do help us out by going to a board or commission or even a NAC, is that we're asking for the volunteers, but we will provide you scripted messaging. So everybody is kind of playing off the same song sheet here. You don't have to feel like you've got to wing it or come up with your own facts, but I think it will be, it'll make your life a lot easier to provide you with the messaging about the Voters Forum.
Any other questions about that? Okay, to be determined, to be continued. Okay, Terry, take it away, land use.
Well, I have not been interacting with my land use subcommittee, so I do apologize for that. And we do have work we need to do, and I have been remiss. So I will commit to starting off the questions about the getting the neighborhood some information for our neighborhoods when they have developments. And I apologize for my lack of action on this. But onto other topics, we did have a joint Planning Commission City Council meeting this past Tuesday talking about the downtown development plan. And if you did not have if you've not had an opportunity to look at the materials, it's on the agenda as Agenda Bill 20205. They had quite an extensive agenda before we got to talking about that. That was interesting to listen to the City Council issues. But anyway, I think what's important is that the agenda bill includes 7 pages of preliminary comments by staff summarizing where they are at that moment in this long, two plus year long project. And I think it's very important that we all look at what has been committed to thus far and will be modified over the next few months and will become a major part of our development code. And it's going to be create a massive change in a lot of respects with respect to downtown development. So I can't overemphasize how important it is for all of us to read the materials and comment. And there will be specific comment periods coming up. Well, you can always comment. Steve Regner is always interested in hearing your thoughts, but it's going to come to the Planning Commission in August for specific code language. So very important project, and I think it's going to influence our downtown area, in my opinion, in a very positive way. But I want everybody to weigh in on that. So just another Planning Commission item that I think would be of general interest, in that we had our first new 5G proposal. If you recall, we had I forgot which planner it was. It might have been Sambo Kirkman came to the BCCI to talk about the various ways 5G might be implemented in the city. And we had our first 5G proposal down on Nimbus Avenue. And it was AT&T. And I must say they did a very good stealth design. It's going to look like a street light. It's going to be a little taller than the current street light. But Planning Commission was positively reacting to the fact that all of the utilities were going to be underground, and effectively this just is going to look like a taller street light. So that's one option that AT&T chose, and we were very happy with it. But it is going to be again one of these other developments that it will influence the visual character of our city, because 5G is going to, the Federal Communication Commission has deregulated cell towers to the extent that staff is still working on the development code, and effectively most of these will not be subject to land use review. They have 90 days by law, federal law, to act. A final decision, like building permit, in 90 days. So they are consolidating all reviews and eliminating any land use reviews. So it's kind of important that Sambo Kirkman is going to come up with is going to finalize the materials for the land use code, which I think will be effectively deleting a lot of the code language that's currently there. So keep apprised of that as that unfolds and Sambo comes out with that new language for our developments for 5G. Any questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, now we have the city update. Franziska?
Hello. So I just have a couple of items on the city update for tonight. So the city would like to affirm its commitment to Black Lives Matter. So as Beaverton prides itself on being a diverse and welcoming community, we are listening and working to address heartfelt concerns brought to our attention by community members about systemic racism and calls for equity. We are committed to a path that brings us closer to where we need to be. As a city, Beaverton has invested in policies and programs to help make our work accessible to all community members who call our city home. Beaverton's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Plan, first adopted in 2015, was updated in 2019, and is a guiding document for internal and external efforts. The Beaverton City Council passed a resolution denouncing systemic racism. At the June 9th City Council meeting, the resolution announces the city's promise to support nonviolent protests and dismantle longstanding actions that harm people of color, as well as a commitment to eliminate racism in city structures and practices. In addition, Mayor Denny Doyle signed the My Brother's Keeper Alliance pledge led by former President Obama and committed to review city policies, seek community input, communicate findings, and reform our community's police abuse force policies. Community engagement and conversation sessions are being planned. For more information and next steps, visit beavertonoregon.gov/be heard. I'll be putting those links in the chat for everyone to access more readily. In terms of city buildings, Washington County remains in phase 1 reopening, and city buildings will continue to provide most services remotely and keep buildings closed to the public for in-person visits and businesses through at least, this says Sunday, July 19th, but that has actually since been updated to Sunday, August 13th, or 16th, I believe it is, I can't remember, mid-August. Some services, such as the library in Beaverton Municipal Court, may begin limited in-person visits sooner with distancing and other safeguards. City services remain available for remote business by phone or online, including housing and business resources, mediation and culturally specific services, building permits and applications, utility billing, and more. Library programs, city events and meetings, and other activities are happening virtually. In addition, Beaverton City Library has launched BCL to Go, a contactless curbside pickup service at the main library. 5 days a week, library card holders can make an appointment at beavertonlibrary.org/BCL to Go. We'll also put that link in the chat as well, to pick up current holds that are in held status, as well as up to 3 book bundles for kids geared toward a specific reading level or interest. Book drops at the main library and the Maurice Schultz branch are open to receive returns. Materials are quarantined for 72 hours before getting checked in, so it may take several days before patrons see returned items off their account. Fines are not being charged for materials returned past their due date. Access to computers by appointment for a limited number of people at the main library is planned to begin. It's actually already begun. Face coverings will be required for all library visitors. For more information regarding library resources and services, visit beavertonlibrary.org. The Beaverton Municipal Court will begin to reopen in a very limited capacity, specifically for criminal arraignments or specific instances where defendants are unable to use technology to access remote hearing options. To ensure the safety of both court users and staff, the courtroom setting has undergone an update to add floor markings for appropriate distancing, rearranged furniture, added plexiglass barriers, and will offer face coverings. For more information, please visit beavertonoregon.gov/court or call 503-526-2290. And as always, for the latest on city services and closures, visit beavertonoregon.gov/coronavirus. And before I get on to my last and final topic, I just want to make sure, are there any questions regarding anything that I just shared on city updates? Okay, well, as it should happen, it's really convenient that I already had this meeting with all of you lovely folks tonight. I was discussing with Bill Kirby, our city attorney, the next steps for charter implementation. And what we are hoping to do is put together FAQs regarding the most often asked questions about the new charter and its implementation. And so since you all have such a pulse on what's happening throughout the city and in your respective neighborhoods, I figured you folks were the person to ask if you had questions right off the bat, or if there are questions that you're hearing in your next meeting that you could share, that we could start to compile a collective list of questions that folks have about the new charter changes and the implementation, you know, whether it's before January 1st, after January 1st, the distinction between interim and the regular city manager, any of those questions. And if you don't have any right off the bat right now, you're always welcome to email me, and we can start putting that list together. But you folks are always the ones that we ask. So I wanted to be sure to put that inquiry out there.
Okay, any other questions from anybody? Okay. Oh,
I have a
great.
question for Franziska. What's our deadline?
That's actually a really good question. As of right now, in terms of our community and communications and engagement plan for a charter implementation, that is going to take place towards the end of August, beginning of September. So I would say mid-August at this point. But I mean, I will gladly, we can always take more questions and add them to the FAQ as more of a living document as things progress, because people may have questions right now, and then as things start happening, they may have other questions. So if you do have questions, just let me know. I'll be really actively involved in that process and would really welcome any thoughts or feedback that folks have either about community engagement on, either the interim or the regular city manager recruitment, or just community engagement, public engagement around, educational campaigns for what the new charter means and its implementation, or any other thoughts that you have.
Thank you.
Terry.
Is the charter language itself posted on the city's website?
Yes, under the charter webpage, the charter draft that went to voters is posted on that page.
Okay, all right.
And then, Deborah, I also see your hand.
The charter was also, language is also part of the packet that was emailed out.
Perfect.
Deborah, go for it.
So just for clarification for me, and given current events, current situations, I know that when the announcement came out that the new police chief had been hired, it was the mayor hired the new police chief. I'm assuming under the charter change, it would be the city manager who would be responsible for hiring a police chief if in that situation.
Councilor Cate, do you want to take that question?
Yes, I think that, but again, we as council can have some influence. For instance, not this time, but the last time we chose a police chief, the council was also involved in some of the panels for choosing that person. So generally when we're doing things as high as a department head, some matter more than others, but the council could choose to be involved with it, but ultimately the city manager is who those people respond to and actually hires and fires them.
And
hopefully hires.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the council will still retain the hiring for things like the city manager and the judges, correct?
Yes, and the auditor, right? Well, wait, when you're saying the city manager, and also I think we still left two for the city attorney.
Yeah, because currently the city council hires the city attorney and like the associate judge that just got hired for.
They technically answer to us. And again, the auditor, that's just an outside firm, but yeah, anyways.
Okay, I have a question from Adam. Go ahead.
Oh, my question was about the city attorney, but it was answered.
Awesome. All right, any other questions? I have a quick wrap up. Any hands, any questions? Okay. So some homework is, if you have any questions about the Housing Options Project, email Rob. Please complete the city manager survey, and please see if you can sign up to visit a NAC or a board or a commission about the voters forum and get the word out there. Does anybody have anything else? I see Sharon, go ahead.
So I was writing, this is like old habits here.
Okay, go for it. Good.
Action items. Also, it was to invite Mark Lovelace and the chief of police for the next month's meeting. And that the charter feedback goes to Franziska by mid-August.
Okay. Anything else?
And that the survey for the interim city manager recruitment closes at the end of this week.
And if you have a chance to fill out that survey on the housing project, it's really fun.
If you have nothing else to do tonight.
So says a nerd.
3 a.m. in the morning doing that, huh?
Yeah.
I'll raise my glass to that.
That's why they call me Bob.
Anything else, ladies and gentlemen? It has been truly a pleasure. I hope to see you again next month, if not before then, and be safe. Be well.
Take care, everyone.